it as we go along. Welcome everyone to our webinar. I think it's the fourth day of our parent webinars this week, which is Inspired Week for Baker and Bloom. So in place of our usual one-day Inspired Day open house on a Saturday, we thought we would spread out the goodies and have a whole week of free parent webinars. So if you haven't had a chance yet, do check out our flyer and see what's come before and what is coming ahead, because we will be sharing some highlights from the previous webinars on YouTube as well. So, but today we are talking about the future of education, and in particular projects and internships. And I'm very excited to be sharing with you tonight because this topic is dear and near to me and to my heart and to why I am in education. So I'd like to begin with this quote to sort of, well, something to think about as more people sign on. What is a successful education? Obviously, all of you here are here because you're parents and you have children that you care a lot about and you want to raise them in a good way and you want to prepare them for their future and offer them a good education. But what is a good education? And I love this Mark Twain quote where he says, allegedly, because we never know with quotes, I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. Very typical of Twain's wry humor, but it does make you think, especially in this day and age where there's so much we can access online independently of school. Where can we find a good education and how can we achieve that? And as parents, how do we guide and support our children so that they can have a good education beyond what schools might be offering them? So I'd like to introduce myself to you all. As I said, my name is Renee, and I'm the founder of Baker and Bloom, which is a K-12 education center. And normally I'd say this to you in person, but obviously you're not here with me today at Baker and Bloom. We're closed right now in terms of in-person learning, but we're doing a lot of remote learning. And we're located in Admiralty across from Pacific Place 3, right between Wan Chai and Admiralty. And hopefully, if you've never been here before, you will get to visit us at some point later this year. So Baker and Bloom was founded 6 years ago. And I've been teaching for many years. Both as an IB teacher, IB English and Humanities teacher, and also privately after leaving the school system and transitioning to working in this sort of beyond school space. One thing that I've been doing for the past 6 years is serving as an admissions counselor for both US and UK boarding schools and universities. And that does inform some of what I have to share with you today. And I was also one of the first teachers, or rather, I was a teacher when ISF launched many years ago. And I bring that up because I think it was a wonderful and very formative experience for me as an educator to get to work at an IB school, at a new school, and also a school that really tried to balance, I think, the best of East and West. It was a wonderful experience. And I think that what I'm trying to do with Baker and Bloom in many ways is about supplementing and working hand in hand with what good schools like ISF does. The past year, I also became an ISTE certified educator. You've probably never heard of the term ISTE, neither had I. But 2 years ago, I attended some conferences and learned that this was a nonprofit that actually is the largest international organization setting standards for technology and education. And last year was the first year that they did overseas training. And so because my own background is in literature, my undergraduate degree was in English. So I went to Harvard, did English, and then I did Renaissance literature at Cambridge. And then I got 2 more degrees. One was in fiction and one was in education. So none of that related to technology, as you can imagine. But I realized that as an educator who believes in lifelong learning, this was a huge area that I had to improve on. And so ISTE, the International Society of Technology and Education, showed me a lot about new standards for what a digital learner should look like. And I can talk a bit about that later as we talk about projects. And I think that's about it. Maybe I should mention that I'm also an advisor for Cocoon Foundation, which is a Section 88 nonprofit dedicated to entrepreneurship education. Okay, so moving on. So the mission of Baker and Bloom, which has to do with sort of our topic today, is to cultivate creative literacy and confidence. And this is because I think education, like many other things in life, like relationships and sort of our health, is something where we all value, but it's very hard to measure. And most of the time in schools, and when you think about systems, metrics matter a lot. And as a result, most of 19th century and 20th century education focused a lot on these sort of KPIs, ways of measuring, okay, if we put in these inputs, what's the output? And quality control, a very factory assembly line uniform model of education. And as we step into this new era, which I'll talk about again, of the industrial 4.0 age, we are thinking a lot more about things that are a little more intangible when it comes to the skills that we need to succeed in this type of a world that is fast changing. So that's why our mission focuses so much on creative literacy and also the confidence and agency to learn. And what we offer is academic rigor. So we have many classes that focus on academics, but we also want to infuse in all of them creative thinking, in addition to critical thinking, and also creative output. So even in our reading and writing courses, there's always an open-ended project at the end of each module. And so our goal is to help prepare students for college, for studying abroad often, and for their careers as well as lifelong learning. And with regards to our name, Baker Bloom is about thinking not so much about getting the bigger slice of the pie, but how to grow the pie and how to develop this mentality of being able to add value so you can bake, feed yourself and feed other people, which is a mentality we try to instill in our students. And also this belief that we're all born to learn and to grow. And when we flourish, we all look different. So the individual learner matters a lot to us. And I think this applies to what we're talking about, because I think projects and internships are two wonderful opportunities for personalized learning and for each child to bloom in their own way. Next, I'd like to very quickly cover some of the innovations that have been happening within education, since we're talking about the future of education. And I'm sure all of you right now, as your children's schools are about to begin, have even started already, you're sort of in the thick of it with remote learning, distance learning, and digital education. So a lot of this might have become very real to you. Whereas before, I think when I introduced this, parents are like nodding and smiling, but they kind of don't understand how close to us this actually is. But there are many different types of ways in which technology is affecting education. On the one hand, it affects the way information is transmitted, right? So you have access to experts from across the globe. But it also affects the way schools are run with learning management systems and the way data is collected. So in the past, I'm sure somewhere out there, there's a principal that might have all their student files from 30 years ago, still filed away somewhere. But most schools probably just chucked everything after like 5 years. But in this age where so much information is collected, if you think about, and a good analogy to think of is medical data, student data is actually driving a lot of innovation in education, both on the very micro level, where you're saying, okay, if you have an adaptive learning platform, let's say something where you're doing math problems, and if you get it wrong, they give you easier ones until you get them right, then it becomes progressively more difficult and challenging. And so the classroom teacher knows for, let's say, linear equations, the class is all struggling with question number 7. So in my class time, I better focus on that question instead of maybe going through every single question. And to big picture data, where we're looking at things like what type of pedagogical approach might be more effective. You can do things where you track people's eyeballs and look at where their attention is falling if you're teaching digitally. And also information in terms of the rate of learning and the type of content that appeals to people. So with a lot of peer-to-peer learning, there is even more data generated that's beyond schools. So that's kind of like outside of schools and global. And then you have what's happening in every classroom or even just your child's learning device. So what I was describing there, where the teacher was adjusting what they do in the classroom based on the data and the apps used, is called blended learning, where you're blending face-to-face in-person teaching with what people do outside the classroom or in rotational stations within the classroom on their own or in groups, but using a device. And that's different from sitting there and watching YouTube. So blended learning has to have that element of the engagement with the teacher. There are many forms of blended learning. Like you can all be together and be watching a lecture. You can all be in different parts of the world and connected. And then you also have game-based learning. That's a huge movement in education. And I think one that ties in very nicely with the idea of project-based learning too, where a lot of theories and features of gaming, especially video games, have been borrowed, and especially ideas like earning points and badges, working in teams, and giving the student, putting them in the driver's seat and giving them missions and tasks, having levels where things are more self-paced. And the beautiful thing about games and video games, and one reason why, even though there's a big part of me that obviously, like probably most of you, feels worried about letting kids play too many video games, there's a beauty to them that I definitely appreciate, which is that you can fail, right? You know, you can't get past this level, stay on it, play, get tips from other people, watch YouTube video on YouTube, people who game, and learn from them, and then go try again. So it definitely helps to develop that growth mindset and that sort of risk-taking mindset, which is important and we're trying to cultivate in this day and age. And then, of course, there are other things like massive online courses, where if you've heard of Coursera, edX, Udemy, lots of online learning courses that organizations that curate classes, often from universities around the world, and offer them online. And some of these are self-paced, some of them, so there's asynchronous and synchronous learning, where asynchronous is like, you know, watch it whenever, but what we're doing right now is synchronous and live. And often it's matched with a lot of forums and offline work and chat groups and sort of learning groups that are smaller. So that's part of my own ISTE training as well. There was in-person training, and then there was a lot of online training, and then we had to create portfolios that were submitted, but there were webinars supporting us along the way. And then finally, I should mention, well, actually two more things. Virtual and augmented reality that affect the way children learn. So if you can imagine learning about or learning how to do something, like pilots learning how to pilot a plane, simulation happens to give you a great opportunity to practice, and again with low stakes. So it also helps you understand a lot of complex things in science, almost in anything, but particularly I think in science, where it's hard to visualize, like how molecules are structured or anatomy, or actually giving people that opportunity to explore spaces. Virtual and augmented reality do a great job there. And if you've heard of Pokemon Go, things like that with mixed reality, you can actually combine physical space learning through augmented reality with online and digital learning. That helps to, I guess it's a way of like giving us even more forms, multi-sensory forms of information, and explaining concepts that are harder to understand through text. And last thing is like maker movement. So if you go to a school where there's a maker space or an innovation space, or if your children go to these schools, you'll know what I'm talking about, where there's a lot of 3D printing and making things, designing things, creating products. It's sort of a fancy form of wood shop in the past. But this is a very important movement. And it kind of relates to the idea of Baker and Bloom, like the idea of making things, because as I'm about to explain, we are moving towards a period where we are able to create physical objects with much greater ease than we used to. So I think in the past, like even the invention of Lego was a major innovation. Kids could build things, not just draw them and doodle, but actually through 3D objects, create fantastic towers, castles, buildings, fire stations, cities, cars, through these little blocks. And now through 3D printing, or even a 3D pen, they can actually create 3D objects. And a lot of technology like Arduino and user-friendly ways of coding help create even simple robots. That at Baker & Bloom, we have STEM classes for 4-year-olds, and they're making simple bots. So these are all things happening in education, which I think 10 years ago, if you told people you can create a robot when you're 4, it would have sounded quite, people would have been incredulous. But nowadays it is possible. And so figuring out when to teach what has become really important. And just to go back to this a bit, in the face of all of this, Baker & Bloom adopts this 4-leaf approach, which I'd like to share with you, because I think as we guide our kids in making choices, it helps out these frameworks. So the first is language arts and communication. So these are very fundamental skills that I think serve them well, even when they're doing internships, for example, written as well as verbal forms of communication. And obviously coding is another language these days that is important to start mastering when you're young, even in elementary school. And then secondly, the ability to learn, so metacognitive skills. We teach a class called Inspired Superlearner. And just this summer, I was teaching it, and we teach things like how do you dissect a subject? So you chunk it, and then you sequence it in a way that makes the most sense. How do you actually figure out for yourself what are the appropriate goals for a project? How do you evaluate whether you've achieved your own goals? These are self-management skills that didn't used to be taught explicitly in a school. But I think that's another thing that project learning or creating personal projects teaches you. And then the third area is creativity. And it definitely, in a world where a lot of things are automated and machine learning is on the rise, the ability, the human advantage is to create value and to add new things. So maintaining that natural creativity that children have and not letting the schooling system, kind of returning to the Mark Twain quote, squelch your creativity, I think matters a lot. And doing things outside of school can keep that fire burning. And leadership and service, because education, I think, aspires to cultivate people who can contribute. And so how can you find opportunities for your children to develop leadership and service experience? I don't think we need to spend too much time with this, other than to say we went from steam to electricity to automation and computing to this world that is dominated by intelligence and the connection between the physical, the digital, and the biological. So having smart machines and even having things that are beyond wearable technology, biotech that's integrated into our bodies or to living organisms around us. Quite a frightening vision, you might say, but it is happening. And so the impact on the workspace is immediate and sometimes at a shocking rate, where whole industries can be wiped out because the processes have been completely replaced by an automated system that is intelligent and maybe more intelligent than the people who used to be doing it. So what is the human advantage, and how really it's not about, oh, let's teach our kids to code and they're going to be okay, because it's not about creating second-class robots, right? We're trying to create outstanding humans. And so learning how to leverage machine learning, leverage the technology and work together with the technology, those are the skills that we're trying to cultivate well, hopefully not even the future, the right now of education. Let me take a look. Okay, we're 20 minutes in. I still want to talk about this because I hope that it does shape a little bit when you think about what projects, what internships are worth pursuing. I hope that this conversation conversation right now is adding to how you think about that when you're making those, or when your child is making those decisions. When Google hires, it looks for many things, but these are some of the core attributes that they look for. General cognitive ability, so yes, they want smart people, but they also look for people who can still learn and adapt, because they know that when you first join them, it's not like you're immediately useful. So your ability to learn is very important. And then leadership skills, so people who have initiatives and actually want to move things forward and are not waiting for instructions. Role-related knowledge, so of course having specific knowledge is important, and that might relate to your thinking about what types of internships might be useful. So if your child is interested in STEM, and I regularly meet parents, new parents and students, and talk to them about planning ahead. Many kids these days are interested in STEM, but I do talk to them, ask deeper questions. So maybe at school, you're doing well in science, but have you ever thought more closely about whether you're interested in power, or you're interested in chemistry and chemical products? Like I have a student I'm working with who's interested in toxicology and geoengineering. So that's great, because it's like, it's a specific area that you can gain expertise and knowledge in. And when people compare you with another person, like in an admissions context, you are able to sort of show a genuine differential in terms of your knowledge, and also you're able to stand out because everybody else can just say STEM in a very general way. But if you have something that is more specific, it shows that you are actually more, I guess, more thoughtful. Of course, you're still at the age where you're trying to build a broad base of knowledge in STEM, but it never hurts through projects and internships to extend in one specific domain or area within the field, whether it be art or music or literature, social science, or STEM. And then finally, googliness, this very ambiguous quality, which is about comfort with ambiguity and having a collaborative nature. And this is where I think, if you think about the way traditional schools work, where you're tested and there is a right answer, we're moving into a world full of unanswerable questions, right? So moving from the teacher asking the questions to the students through inquiry-based learning, driving with questions. And that's what project-based learning is actually really good at. Andreas Schleicher, the OECD Education Directorate, OECD does a lot of research. It does the test called PISA test, ranking sort of like the report cards of nations in terms of their education system. He makes a case for 21st century learning by pointing out that routine cognitive skills that are easiest to teach and easiest to test are also the skills that are easiest to digitize, automate, or outsource. And that's why I encourage you to, however old your child is, whether they're like literally just 5 years old or 15 years old, to encourage them to try to do projects, because it moves beyond those routine skills. He talks about how literacy is about managing non-linear information structures. I'm a teacher, I've taught in schools, and I know that when I have to quickly assess 20 students, it is much easier when there is a marking scheme that is direct, that is easy, that is standardized, and it also is more fair. So like I was going back to what I was saying before about KPIs, there are some real practical reasons to why education system has not evolved faster. Issues of fairness or perceived fairness, and also just the workload of what a human being like a teacher can actually do. And so standardization is actually a very efficient way of teaching. But if you can help it, you can help your child step outside of that box. And all these things about being collaborators, applying your skills to widening scopes of situations. These are things where you're stepping outside of the classroom, or you're really thinking beyond the knowledge and the concepts, but actually what can I do with these knowledge and concepts? And that's why projects are really useful. And then finally, I'd like to show this OECD Compass of Learning. It's called Compass of Learning for 2030. You can explore it on its website, but I just want to pull out 3 specific competencies they call transformational competencies. The first is creating new value. And that's about not just solving problems, but what new knowledge or new solutions can you provide? And again, that has a lot to do with student agency and creativity. And then secondly, reconciling tensions and dilemmas. And that relates to the Googliness idea of comfort with ambiguity, because we live in a very polarized world, as I'm sure you all know, whether it is in Hong Kong or just all over the world in different nations and even across nations. And I'm sure living here, we feel it very acutely, and it causes a lot of conflict that is very sad and very unnecessary. So hopefully, if we are to work towards a more harmonious society and a more peaceful world, we can teach our children to learn intellectually and emotionally how to reconcile the many tensions that exist in the world. So it really is not about denying that these tensions do exist, and moral dilemmas will continue to arise as new technologies emerge and dominate our lives. But I think that if we don't explicitly teach children ways to reconcile, psychologically reconcile, but also through, or intellectually also reconcile these tensions, it's hard for them to create new value, because you're kind of stuck in a rut where you either are full of anger because you're on one side of things and very angry at the rest of the world that's not on that side, or you're very depressed because you can't reconcile these conflicts, which has to do with well-being as well. And then finally, taking responsibility. And when we talk about big themes like sustainability and citizenship, digital citizenship, a lot of that has to do with teaching children that we owe it to society, to our collective life, to take responsibility for ourselves, first of all. So I think I'll skip this because I'm sharing a lot of frameworks with you and I want to get more to the project, but you can take a screenshot or a picture of this, and it's also about 21st century skills and the importance of entrepreneurial thinking and agility. So, oopsie, left out a quotation mark there, but I did want to say, I wonder whether you've thought about what a project is, because we use that word a lot. And so I guess I want to define that word before we go on. A project is not just doing a task or an activity, but it's something where there is a desired result, and there is a systematic approach towards reaching that result. And that's what makes it valuable. Not just that, I mean, your child could accidentally fall in love with playing the saxophone, learn to play online, perform among family, then, start a band and perform. So that's great, but that's not a project, right? That's an arc of a wonderful journey of learning, an adventurous, unplanned journey, but it's not a project. So a project is a little more deliberate than that. And it integrates a lot of different skills. It can be done individually, it can be done collaboratively. A project within the school context, we also differentiate between projects that sometimes are called more dessert projects versus main course projects. Dessert projects are sort of lighter, smaller projects that you do at the end of a unit where you've already learned a concept, which might be, let's say, the idea of urban revitalization. And then you do a little project where you find a case study and you investigate. So that dessert doesn't mean it's like not important, but it's sort of tagged on at the end. And a different approach is actually where it's the main course. So the whole curriculum is designed around a question, and the whole unit is about trying to answer and explore this question and to create a product. So here are some common features of a project-based learning, which is different from a project, okay? So I want to sort of introduce different concepts. One is your child pursuing a project on their own, The other is schools that actually adopt project-based learning as a pedagogical approach. But I want to share it with you, not because your teacher is working in a classroom, but because I think there's a lot to learn from the project-based learning approach. So some of the key components include authenticity, that it's not a superficial, sort of like those word problems where, oh, two trains traveling in different speeds and you solve a math problem. But really something that is a real world problem. And ideally there's student voice. So the students have a choice over either the genre of the project, the topic, or maybe the format and the mode, or maybe how the type of product they create at the end. Often there's a driving question or a challenge. So you see the words inquiry and innovation there. And at the end of the project, you publicly present it. Publicly could be publishing online. It could be sharing with your classmates or with parents, a whole school, or having an exhibition night. And 21st century skills is not like a core criteria, but it's just saying that it really is a wonderful way of teaching all the skills I was talking about before, that comfort with ambiguity, collaboration, learning to learn. Those skills are learned in the process of creating the project. So even though there's definitely the product, PBL is very much about the process. And as a key component of that process is feedback and revision. And even in the workplace, we know this, that critique and reviews are really important for good organizational culture, but also if you're driving innovation and you're not reflecting, you're not going to go very far, very fast. But at the same time, we also know that, at least I know from teaching and myself, that human nature, we're not necessarily very open to critique naturally. So learning the many frameworks that exist for how to give and receive feedback is very valuable. And so even if you're doing a project with your child alone, I mean, independent of school, I do encourage you to think about formal ways of giving, formal and informal ways of giving feedback and doing more than one version. Right? So the beauty of projects is like the chance to prototype things, to test and improve. Okay, so just a quote to inspire us a little. Tony Wagner, who is the person who came up with those 7 survival skills of the 21st century, is sort of an innovation educator. And he talks about the combination of play, passion, and purpose, which that best develops the discipline and perseverance required to be a successful innovator. And that's kind of where projects come in and internships. So I hope this framework can help you as you guide your child who may be exploring different ideas. Think about their strengths, their individual strengths, their passions, and what purpose, what's the point of doing this? So with strengths, a big part of this is self-reflection. And depending on the age of your child, that is a skill that may have to be developed. And interviewing other people is something you can ask your child to do. And actually is a fun activity, even among family members, to get to know each other better. And it's something, if your child's very young, you could do it together with them, right? Like you could also ask them what they think your strengths are, so that they don't feel like it's a judgment on them. There is also what we call the VIA character strengths, and these are 24 strengths in different domains, research-based, and a more research-oriented approach to identifying strengths, but there's a link there. And even if you just Google VIA character strengths, you'll be able to see these 24 strengths that are spread across 6 different domains that include things like humanity, temperance, wisdom as domains. And the specific strengths might include judgment, love of learning, curiosity, kindness, and they have a very conveniently, they have designed surveys that you can ask your child to take and find out what their character strengths are. And that can be very revealing, and what talents they have. So this could be in the arts, it could be in academic areas. And sometimes I find with admissions, it's often the things kids do in their spare time that makes them the most interesting. You know, whether it's mixing music or like cooking with their moms or dads, or things like skateboarding, things that they do on the side, which kind of shows me what animates them, and where often they do have talent. People, and it's like a positive feedback loop, right? Because when they have talent, they get positive feedback and they enjoy it more and develop that. So sports, of course, is another area. So I do think thinking about strengths is very important, both character strengths and actually skills. And then secondly, passions. So we hear this word a lot, of course, and it's a very overused word. Having said that, I still believe it is a very important part of this compass, because in terms of finding areas where you can find both success in the conventional sense, but also joy and pleasure in the process, has a lot to do with finding your passion. And one way is to ask your child where they lose the sense of time. Because if they enter this zone of like, kind of like what is called flow, they lose a sense of like how long they've been doing something. And it's also something where you don't have to compel them to do it, but they initiate it and they want to do it themselves. You can also ask them about books they like to read, magazines, websites, podcasts, games, events they choose to go to, whether it's concerts or exhibitions. And I think that most kids have these interests. And I will say that if you feel like you have a child that has no interest at all, I do hear that at least maybe 1 in every like 10 kids tell me they don't know what they like, or parents complain their kids don't like anything. You might want to investigate whether their schedules are a bit overpacked, that they're too tired to pursue anything, and they're too overwhelmed academically maybe, or by other things in their life. So I think it is a bit of a warning sign if you have no idea what your passion is and you have no time to pursue any interest. And then the other thing is like, obviously, what at school is their favorite subjects, or sometimes for kids it's not a subject, but like a cause or a problem. Like you have kids who are obsessed with like plastics or animals or baseball, basketball, things that they're drawn to. Those are wonderful areas to tap into as you make decisions about projects. And then the last thing is purpose. So schools, like admissions offices, like to see that, but really this is about, like we were saying, what we're aspiring towards is to give them that opportunity to make a difference. And this is about finding that mission that drives your project. So I think beginning with finding a problem to solve is a good place, but it doesn't have to be that. For some people, it's not really a problem. A lot of times teenagers, I think, like to share a passion. So if they like basketball, teaching other people how to play basketball, or if they like playing the ukulele, teaching someone how to do that, that's a great project. Or if they like playing a game, maybe designing a game themselves would be a great purpose. Even though like you may not think that that's like a very high purpose, it could become one. And that's the point of projects. They don't have to be super high stakes, especially if your kids are young. You can build towards bigger projects. But I think doing small projects teach you that cycle of and project management skill, which is so essential to 21st century work. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples of some of our students that these are not their real names. So with some of our kids, they like one of them, Dixon, who was very much into environmental causes. He created an app that I'll show you later, an air pollution sensor, and that was done working with a STEM coach. And then another student who took IB literature with us and joined our Inspired Internship program was interested in studying psychology and education, and then ended up, we helped her place her within a fintech company. And you might think, okay, well, what does a teenager know about fintech? Well, it turns out they can still be very useful, because all companies want to get user feedback. So she was able to call a lot of customers and actually talk to them about the process of using the app. And so sometimes you don't necessarily have to have that knowledge to contribute in a workplace. And this is one of the students that was creating that air pollution sensor that was placed on a trail in different parts of Hong Kong. And then we also encouraged him to do an environmental art show. So he curated the show. These are his artwork, but then he invited other people to create artwork to raise awareness for the environment. So you see how sometimes you pick a topic that is broader and it can be a beautiful interdisciplinary project. So with our Inspired projects, we have areas, these are the more typical areas that we cover: service, STEM projects, biology, engineering, chemistry, robotics, that type of thing. Creative projects, that's sort of what we, I think, specialize in. And of course, writing, which is very much a part of our DNA, being a language education center at first. And writing is a very important skill and is often combined with other projects. And these days, we also do things like create podcasts and videos. Designing and humanities. So specific projects, you can see some on the right, being published in peer-reviewed journals. Doing one recent one was on the history of the Nobel Prize winner, one of the first female biologists who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the cure to malaria. Artemisinin, right? I was thinking, what is the name of that medicine? Artemisinin. So it was about the history of that. And we helped with sort of the research process and also the editing and writing process, because it does combine a lot of skills. Launching a charity, a Section 88 charity. In this particular case, it was an art education charity. Designing apps, so we do plenty of that. But what is special, I mean, kids these days can write an app very easily. There's so many platforms that help you do that, in fact. But what we try to do is to guide them to first learn some skills, technical skills, and then find the right problem to solve, because the scope of a project is very important. So if your app, like tons of other apps exist that does exactly what your app does, you probably want to localize it more or refine it so that it's serving, like even with the air pollution example, it's not an air pollution sensor for India, but specifically for the air of Hong Kong. And as you can see, some of these other ones are related to research and STEM, social media marketing, and also publishing. Not just self-publishing, but really getting a proper publishing house to publish a book. So what can Baker & Bloom do to help you? We can provide a personal project coach and also contact with field experts in a whole variety of industries, ranging from medicine and law and finance to service and sports, data management, and AI and machine learning. And we also teach very explicitly project management skills, how to set SMART goals, how to define the vision of your project, do timelines and milestones, and analyze data. And disciplinary knowledge is important here. So we have different coaches that know how to analyze different, so for example, if you're analyzing psychology data, that type of data is different from literary data or chemistry data. So that part does require some subject expertise. Support with the design of the final product, and we give feedback obviously in person, but also if you do the program, we give 2 written critiques of work in progress. The program I'm referring to is a 6-month program, but we also just work with kids at their own pace through individual coaching as well. And of course, personal encouragement. And that's actually very important because sometimes kids lose their momentum. A lot of schoolwork that is prioritized, and you feel the heat of deadlines and you forget about the project you started in the summer. So we try to keep them on track and guide them till they reach the end. And that feeling, that satisfaction of completing something is also what we hope to help them achieve. And we also ask them to keep a process journal. So it could be digital, it could be through photographs mainly, it could be through software called, we often use the software called Notation, which is wonderful. And you should check it out if you don't know about it. It's like Evernote, but it's very compatible with other apps. And a couple more examples: writers getting published, people who found internships that relate to sports, one that has to do with sports management. Another sports one was they did a lot of movement tracking with, sorry, I don't know the name of the technology, but I know that there was stuff all over their bodies. And while they were dancing, actually, recorded the movement, and they created some type of app to improve technique through this. This is why we have a STEM program director, but through this, I suppose it was a form of wearable technology that allowed them to track the motion of a dancer. And then another type of sports project, oh, actually internship was a service one, where it was for an NGO that promoted sports to underprivileged youth. Other types, starting a startup for youth who have gone through rehab. Ones, and it allows for scope of imagination and combining writing with coding. So those are really fun projects. We had some kids who were doing it, who were collaborating, and one of them was in a whole other country this summer. So I thought that was particularly cool. Okay, and now I'd like to invite Dr. Minh Tran, who is part of Baker & Bloom. He's also a college admissions counselor. Dr. Tran has been training a lot of interns going through our internship program. So I'd like him to share a bit on that, what advice and tips for you. Hi, Minh, if you could join. Whoops. Oh, I can't hear you, Minh. Oh, is that just me? Wait, can everybody hear Minh? I can't hear him. Okay, I don't think we can hear you. Do you need to turn your audio on or your laptop sound?
On the computer.
Wait, I can hear you. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Well,
all right. So Renee, if you could put back the slides. The first one is about the different types of industries that our students go into. Actually, because of our extensive network, we place students into a number of startups and also established companies. So from a retail brand, like the launch of a new shoes brand, to major sports organizations like the Brooklyn Nets, to different tech firms doing different kinds of industries, in different industries. So one that's founded a new water fountain system for schools, ed tech, so helping a coding academy launch in mainland China, to media, building an app actually, and a website function for a dementia news site, and many, many more. So our students go into a variety of industries, and we help them to understand what their preferences are, and then we work to place them into these different industries. And then they can do a variety of functions within those industries, from sales and marketing to finance, to research, to, if they're more creative, design and writing, and then the more technical product development. And on the next slide, you'll see Renee, if you could go to the next slide. So you'll see that what we do for them, both before they start the internship and during the internship, is a lot of preparation. So we first help them to create and edit their resume and prepare them for these job interviews, because even though we provide them this internship, they have to get it. So we have to convince these employers to take these high school interns. So that's why we help the students to make sure that they look as compelling as possible to these employers. And then during their internships, we also talk a lot to them about workplace etiquette to make sure that they know how to behave like a professional. And then similar to what Renee was talking about in terms of project documentation, we also help them to document their internship to make sure that they have the photos and the documents and the evidence for their work, for their college application. And that on the next slide, you'll see that after the internship, the training continues. And Renee, could you go to the next slide, please? We also give them workshops on how to write about their internship for their resumes for college applications, as well as their personal statements. Something very simple, a courteous act, but something that makes a big difference in terms of how people remember you. Writing thank you emails to their managers and to their team. And then writing the ask for their manager to write them a letter of recommendation. And then we also help them to prepare for college interviews, and help them figure out how to answer these questions about their internship experience. So that's a little bit about our project, also our internship program. Our students have a fantastic time. I mean, I just finished talking to this summer's cohort. Everyone had a really transformative experience. The eyes open widely, because they see for the first time what it's like to work in the real world. They learn so much, and then they have great stories to tell. So back to you, Renee.
Thank you so much, man. Great. So we're almost done here. Let me see. Okay. And I guess because I know a lot of people these days are interested in STEAM careers or STEM careers, I wanted to share this slide with you. And I was saying before that role-related knowledge, the specific areas within STEM. These are 10 areas that are the top areas of focus at HKUST's new campus in Guangzhou. And I think it's a great indication of what's to come and what's important in this fourth industrial revolution era, right? So you have things like robotics, autonomous systems, biomedicine, advanced materials, smart manufacturing, and population socioeconomic development. And obviously sustainability is a huge top of mind one. But you can tell that a lot of times these are not covered in schools. And so part of what I wanted to, oh, I guess I do have a bit more to share. Maybe I will skip this part. This is a program, an entrepreneurship program that we've been doing through Cocoon, and we have a good relationship obviously with Cocoon, and so we send kids to do a lot of things with startups through them. So these are pictures of visiting companies and bringing them to startups, getting speakers to come to us and taking them on field trips. But very quickly, I just want to share with you that as some of you know, I'm working on building a new school, and actually Dr. Min Tran is our head of admissions as well. But so we're building this new school precisely because we believe in all the things we've been talking about. Project-based learning and how to teach these non-linear thinking skills, these human well-being skills, handling ambiguity, reconciling tensions, adding value, while delivering strong academics. And in doing so, in the process of designing the school, I've had the pleasure of visiting many wonderful, innovative schools. And these are some that I want to share with you to show you that actually this can be done within a school, and maybe you can spread the good word in the schools that you're at. So Design Tech High is actually one of the very few schools works directly curriculum. And it's a public school. Works is another school that is project-based, and very, very much so, to the degree where they have no curriculum but projects. Okay. And then we have Nueva, which is a very established school in California, but it actually, in addition to nurturing social emotional acuity, that is something that they're really focused on. But the way they do it is actually through these projects. So you can see the innovation space. Digital fabrication. This is a maker space there. And a lot of these schools have spaces that are very unorganized, that look like workshops. And you see kids wearing goggles, looking like they know what they're doing, working with equipment, and a lot of student initiative. And just that space and freedom to tinker. Oops. Castanea, a very well-known girls' school in California, in Palo Alto, and a lot of the values that we've been talking about, they teach through projects. So to wrap up, I wish for your children creative success, and I hope this sharing has been useful to you. And I think the components of creative success have to do with working on deepening passion, pursuing service. Often it is through helping other people that the students find meaning and their purpose, and how to strike a balance between the many different things that they're doing, and also between doing the project and reflecting on the project, and reflecting on the process, and then finding their true north. So ultimately, we hope that through doing projects and internships, your children will be able to find something that can help them find purpose later on in life as well. And just so you know, these are some of our fall offerings at Baker & Bloom, which we're very excited about. There's academic coaching as well as the projects coaching. And sometimes kids are not ready for a project yet, they think. I don't think there's such a thing, but if people feel that way, they can join like a math STEM class where we do mini projects. And then after the course, they might come up with a project on their own. And obviously we have college consulting and counseling for both boarding school and college as mentioned. And then tomorrow, we're actually doing our info session, introducing our new school, Bloom Academy, at 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And on Saturday, we have 2 more talks. One is on U.S. college admissions, and the other is on UK and U.S. boarding school admissions with Karen, as well as Rory Riley. Karen Kwok is our U.S. boarding school admissions counselor, and Rory Riley is our UK counselor who lives in England. And in case you missed these talks, and some of them, they were really well received. So we've recorded them, and we've just decided, because of a lot of requests, that we will put them online for a short period. So if you're interested in any of these talks but missed them, do let us know, and we can send you a link to watch them. So some of them are on how to make the most of online classes, which is a need that I'm sure all of us have right now if you have kids. Learning tips from a certified reading specialist, creativity, and also from our STEM program director, May, how to be future ready. And if you have older kids, IB English life hacks, which was just earlier today. So thank you so much for joining us for this
Renee, webinar. There's a question in the chat.
Wonderful.
It's a private, so you don't see it, but I'll read it to you.
Okay.
Would you please share the advantage of hiring experts like us to coach the kids rather than having school teachers and parents do so? Isn't it school counselors and parents are supposed to be someone that's more familiar with the kids' characters?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think you hire anyone to do a project, nor do you need to hire anyone to do an internship, but it's just about the value that we can add, right? So sometimes a student doesn't know what they even like. And there's a lot of subject expertise that I was talking about, which really accelerates the process of finding a problem worthy of solving. So for example, someone might know that they really like to write, and they may not even know about all the different genres, like the differences between nonfiction writing and fiction writing. So first we can explore that. Because we have the subject expertise, we can make them help them work smarter and save time. So for example, we can expose them first to the genre of nonfiction in a kind of mini course, and get them to write some things in nonfiction like journalism or personal memoir, show them good samples. And then in fiction, also show them how to do that in different fictional creative genres. And then we can help them decide, okay, which did you like more, why? So giving them professional critique and feedback, and then guiding them in defining something interesting they want to do. I think that, for example, depending on the subject, we can also connect you to experts in the field, like whether it's aeronautics or bioengineering, things where, I mean, depending on the parent, some parents obviously are experts already themselves, in which case you can offer that feedback, but sometimes it's outside of your own personal area of expertise. So that's sort of in terms of technical expertise, which I think not only saves you time, but is the value of having a teacher who has more knowledge in that field. And then on the other hand, there's the whole project management process that we're trying to teach. And I think one thing that I'm proud to say Baker & Bloom teachers are very good at is striking that balance between guiding them and making them, well, not making, but giving them that sense of ownership. So even in college counseling, that's a very important skill, because you don't want people to feel like oh, well, you told me what to write for my essay, and then you like majorly edited, change every example I had to give. So really, it doesn't feel like my story anymore. There, even if you get in, you're not going to feel great about that, right? So for us, it's very important because we are about learning first and foremost, and about getting the kids to be creative. So the skill of facilitating kids to be creative and giving them enough scaffolding and support in the right moments so that they don't feel like they're going to waste time or lose focus, but also empowering them so that they can develop their own interests and the project is theirs. That's, I think, a skill that we teach and a balance we strike. And I guess finally, it's more a human dynamic issue where sometimes, I don't know about you, but my kids don't seem to listen to me. Everything I tell them to do, they do the opposite. So it can help to have a third party that is neutral. It doesn't come with all the baggage of like the relationship, pre-existing relationship, step in. And, you know, I may not know the child at first. And so getting to know them, maybe I'm like able to share with them a perspective on themselves that someone very close to them may not be able to provide. So I hope that gives you a sense.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I actually had a parent conference today, and the parent said to me, Dr. Tran, my daughter listens to you, but not us. Can you tell her to do X, Y, Z? So I totally agree on your last point. And then another point I would say is that for school teachers, often a teacher will have anywhere from 20 to 100 students. So a school teacher often doesn't have the time to give you that individual attention and guidance, where that a very involved project requires. Renee, there are two more questions. One is, how old do you have to be for internship placement? And the other is,
that's a great question.
The other is related, which is if a project is for okay. Go ahead.
Oh, internships, generally it's 16. I think, Patricia, you asked that question. Hi, Patricia. Yes. 16, because legally that is what they have to be. But if it is an internship where they're volunteering, like at a nonprofit, and I mean, unpaid internship is a very controversial thing, but I think for safety reasons, 16 is the age that that our students are when we do internship placements. But if it's like as volunteer experiences and a nonprofit charity context, they could be a little bit younger.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, if the project is for college admissions, how early should we start? Is 9th grade too early?
So I think the question depends on whether you're talking about a short project or a long-term project. And short projects, you can, a lot of times you don't acquire those more sophisticated project management skills till you're doing like your 4th, your 5th project. And so we have kids, oh, maybe I can even show you, where they build websites and you'll see that they actually, sorry, let me quickly find a website to show you, where they, here. So when they first come to us, they may be only in 7th grade, and they start doing like a small project. I remember I worked with a 5th grade girl who designed a school, like it was for underprivileged kids, and it was based on her own interests. And that project was with us. But she also had many other projects in the over the years. And so it just is sort of the beginning of a journey and developing those skills. But let me see, oh, here we go. So here's one example where there's a project, and each project might have a different page. And as you get, can you see it? Okay, as you get older, you will, this one was called Microscopic Monet, where Miss May, our STEM teacher, was working with her to look at things under the microscope, and they were creating some artwork based on it. So little things that she did when she was younger. Then you see like bigger projects where she's like creating yogurt, and it's kind of more advanced projects. And then this is another student who I think he was only in grade 7 when he joined us. So also working on projects that STEM projects where now he's doing like market research, he's looking at supply and demand. Whereas when he was younger, it was really just design projects and there was no real prototyping. But now there is prototyping, right? And actually testing it and sharing it. So you can see there's Operation Fairy Dust, Operation Disassembled, or Operation Neptune. I guess he really likes operations. And yeah, different things where the child is exploring different things. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No problem. I think that was perfect. But I would just add that for college admissions counseling, we do start in grade 9. So that's the youngest that we'll take on for college admissions counseling.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Maybe I should say that there are some projects that become big over the years.
Yes.
So it's not always just like small, then big. It can be a small thing that evolves, like the
That
charity
builds.
is a good example.
Yeah.
So originally it was like this person teaching one person art, then it was teaching art classes, then it was doing it in an organization, then it was like starting an independent charity, doing it in many schools. So it was her interest over many years that led to that charity. It wasn't like overnight, you know, start a charity. That would be kind of like microwaving something. Lisa?
I think we have Florence with us. But I think that's all the questions in the chat. If you have any others that you haven't brought up, but that you would like to ask us, feel free to email us and the questions will be passed to us and we'd be happy to get back to you. Okay. Is that all, Renee? Would you like to say anything else?
No, I hope to see some of you again at future webinars, and thank you so much for joining us this evening, and hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and that your families are doing well, and you know, hang in there with the online, protect their eyes, and hope everyone stays healthy. Take care.
Yes, yes.
And
thank you, everybody.
All in person soon next time.
Exactly.
All right, good night. Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.